Hi guys, so since I put up my last video last week on attachment and surrender, I've been receiving some questions around attachment and how you know if you are attached to something. And the other thing that keeps coming up as well is this idea around negative attachments. And I often hear people talking about how we need to release our attachment to negative beliefs or negative ideas or negative attachments. And I would like to first speak about that side of things, this idea of negative attachments. And the way that I see it and the way that I understand it at this point in time is that there is no such thing as a positive or negative attachment. They're all still attachments. And it's the attachment that we have to whatever it is that is causing us to stay stuck or to stay limited in some way, or our experience is limited in some way due to the attachment itself, not to the object or the person or the situation, whatever it is. It's the attachment to it. So, like I've mentioned before, if we are in a space of enjoying whatever it is in the moment, then when that thing leaves our experience, there is no sense of longing or no sense of desire for it if we don't have an attachment to it. So it's our attachments that keep us longing for something or holding on to something, and keep us in a space of wanting and wanting that thing or experience, and that's what's getting in our way. So this idea of positive or negative attachments is really not true. It's just an idea or a belief that we hold, but any kind of attachment or any form of attachment is the thing that is getting in the way of you making progress on this path, whether it's awakening or coming to reality, or whatever you want to call it, or coming to your true self. So we need to release this idea that we have negative attachments and then other attachments, because essentially we don't. We just have attachments, and it's that in itself that we need to release and let go of. And the other idea or the other question that has been coming up is one around, how do I know if I'm attached to something? And there's two things I would like to say about that. Firstly, we need to look at our emotional responses and reactions. If we are having any form of emotional response or reaction to a situation, to a person, to an object, to whatever it is, an experience, then we can tell from that emotional response that there is some form of attachment to that thing, whether it's an attachment to an outcome with that thing or attachment to the object itself or to the person. And that's what we need to then take a look at, is where are we having emotional responses and reacting emotionally? Because if we look in that direction, we will see that there is an attachment of some form. And the second thing is that we need to look at our thoughts. So our thoughts will also point us in the direction of attachments. So we need to become conscious of what's happening in our minds and the thoughts that are playing out and trying to be heard. So often we go through our day unconsciously thinking thoughts, and our thoughts just run wild, and there's no sense of having a handle on our thoughts or an awareness of our thoughts. That's where we need to take a look and see what's happening, because our thoughts can very quickly take us down a spiral into a very negative space due to our attachments. So, like I was saying before, we can have attachments to our thoughts, to our beliefs, to our identity. The biggest attachment that we all carry, or that we all have, is an attachment to the idea of ourselves, our identity. So the biggest attachment we need to let go of is the I. We need to let go of there being a separate me to you, because ultimately there isn't. It's just consciousness. So there is no separation between you and I. That's just an egoic thought, and there is an attachment to that thought, an identity or an identification with that thought, and that in itself is keeping us in egoic identity. So as an example, a very kind of simple example that has played out in my life many, many times over, not so much now as it was before. It's reduced a lot, and there's a lot more peace now for me. But what often used to happen was something as simple as a text message. If I sent somebody a message and I didn't receive a response within the time that my ego had said is an appropriate amount of time, then my mind would start going into this spiral of, why aren't they responding? Is it because I'm messaging too much and they're getting annoyed, or I'm being a nuisance, or whatever it is? This process would happen where I would eventually get to this thought of either I'm not good enough or I'm not important. And either of those two thoughts became insecurities and were reinforced every time somebody took a little bit too long to respond to a text message. And that specified amount of time was purely something in my head. There was this attachment to receiving a response within a certain amount of time. And it's something as simple as that can take us into this spiral of thought processes that lead to our suffering, that lead to our further identification with the ego, and they lead to further insecurities and reinforced beliefs that aren't true. My mind wouldn't automatically go to, oh well, they might be busy, or something might be going on, I hope they're okay. It wouldn't go into anything about them. It always became about me, this me that I think I am, and ultimately that's the illusion, because there is no me, there is no Fane, there is no this idea of Fane is not a solid thing. That is the illusion. When you do inquiry into who you are, you'll start to see where your ego is still holding on, where it's still attached to ideas or thoughts or beliefs or whatever it is, emotions. So it's those attachments that we need to let go of. The biggest attachment that we need to let go of is this idea that there is a separate self here to the rest of the world, to the rest of what I would see as my reality. Ultimately, there is just one consciousness, there's one reality, but it's the ego and our attachment to it that creates individuality and separation. So there are practices we can do, meditations, self-inquiry, and different forms of practice we can use in order to become aware of our attachments. And one of the simplest ones I've found is just to observe your thoughts throughout your day. Every time you have a thought, ask yourself who is having that thought. And what you'll start to see is that it's the ego. The ego is is the realm of thought, and we don't need to identify with that. So the thoughts can come and go like clouds in the sky, but we don't need to believe in them. We don't need to believe what our minds are saying, because the ego is self-serving. So moving beyond that and releasing those attachments, we can come into the awake space and we can live more and more from that space. And that's ultimately the goal, is to live from the state or the space of consciousness. So reach out if you would like to know more about this or discuss this any further, and I will chat to you again soon.